Hello, good day everyone, and welcome back to our uh, lecture video series in logic. In this video, we are going to talk about categorical propositions. Previously, we have enumerated the different kinds of propositions. Remember that propositions are expressed judgments, and judgments are statements that affirm or deny something. So, what is presented in the video, as you can see, is a definition of a categorical proposition. It has a subject and predicate relationship, wherein the subject is either affirmed or denied by the predicate. A proposition also has three basic elements: the subject, the predicate, and the copula. The copula in grammar is the same with the linking verb is, are, etc., etc. Now, generally, the categorical propositions are classified according to the quality and quantity. When we say quality, the proposition can either be affirmative or negative. And according to quantity, the proposition may be either universal or particular. Because of this, we came up with four different kinds of propositions as discussed earlier during our synchronous class. Also, you may want to go back to our previous video so that you'll be reminded of what we are talking about in this video. So, a negative proposition has a not on the copula, although it is also possible that if you do not find the word not on the copula, there would be a word no in the proposition. So whenever you see a no or a not in a proposition, automatically the quality of that proposition is negative. We will discuss on that further later on. A combination of the quality and the quantity can create four kinds of propositions. We have four: A, E, I, and O. An A proposition is universal and affirmative. So the quantity of an A proposition is universal and the quality of an A proposition is affirmative. Or, just like what you can see, all S is P. S there stands for the subject and P there stands for the predicate. Is the copula. So there's no and not in the proposition. Wala kang makikitang salitang no, wala kang makikitang salitang not doon sa proposition. So easily, alam mo na affirmative ang proposition na to. You also see the modifier all, which means that the proposition is universal. Okay, so an example of that proposition is all nations are independent. All, meaning universal, wala kang nakitang no or not sa proposition, kaya siya ay affirmative. So again, an A proposition is a universal and affirmative proposition. What about an E proposition? An E proposition has a quantity of universal and the quality is negative. The formula is no S is P. Okay, so halimbawa, no nations is independent. Okay, and then we have an I proposition, particular, affirmative, and an O proposition, particular, negative. So A, E, I, and O. Now let us discuss further. I'm introducing to you the square of oppositions. I hope that in the previous lecture video, I have discussed and established the four different propositions. Malinaw sana yon. Kung hindi nyo maalala, refer back to our previous video. This is going to be a new topic, the square of oppositions. In this topic, we will be talking about the relationship of propositions to each other. Kung maalala ninyo, pinag-usapan natin yung relationship of terms. Di ba? Meron tayong terms according to relation. Okay? Um, meron tayong contradictory terms, meron tayong contrary terms, meron tayong correlative terms, at meron tayong privative terms. Ngayon naman, tapos na tayo sa terms, ang pag-uusapan natin ay ang propositions. Now, this square of oppositions will show you the relationship of one proposition to another proposition. And I want you to take note of this very well. So we have an A proposition. The quantity is universal and the quality is affirmative. All X are Y. A proposition is contrary to an E proposition. Okay? Tandaan yan. A proposition is contrary to E proposition. A proposition is the super altern of an I proposition. I just want you to look at the what is shown on this screen. A, E, I, O. A and E, contrary. A and I, subaltern. E and O, another subaltern. A and O, contradictory. I and E, contradictory. Okay. Palalimin natin konti at explain na mabuti ano ang lalabas niyan. Halimbawa, all S are P and some S are not P are contradictories. Example is what you can see below. All politicians are corrupt. And then another proposition, some politicians are not corrupt. Before we analyze the relationship of these two propositions, I want you to tell me what kind of propositions are presented here. The first example is all politicians are corrupt. What is the quantity of this proposition? We see the word all, therefore, it is a universal proposition. Now, do you see the word no or not in the proposition? Wala kayong makita. Therefore, it is an affirmative proposition. Therefore, the first example, all politicians are corrupt, is an A proposition. Okay, A proposition yan. What about the second example? Some politicians are not corrupt. Okay, nakita mo yung modifier na some, kaya alam mo kaagad na particular ang quantity na yan. At nakikita mo rin na sa proposition merong word na not, kaya automatic, negative ang proposition na yan. So anong proposition nga ang particular at negative? Is it A, is it E, I, or O? The answer is O. Therefore, in the examples that we have on our screen is an A proposition and an O proposition. So anong relationship ng A proposition sa O proposition? Balikan ninyo yung square of oppositions. Tingnan nga natin kung ano sila. Ayan, yung A, tingnan nyo, diagonally nakaturo sa O at nakalagay, contradictory sila. Ayan, kaya ibig sabihin, ang A proposition ay contradictory sa O proposition. Another example of a contradictory proposition. No S is P and some S are P. These are contradictory propositions. Okay. Two examples again are given. Number one, no politician is corrupt. The other example is some politicians are corrupt. Again, let us identify what kind of propositions do we have in the examples. The first example, no politician is corrupt. What is the quality? Okay, quality of this proposition. When we say quality, it is either affirmative or negative. O kitang-kita nyo naman, may salitang no, kaya negative kaagad yan. Okay? What about the quantity? What is the quantity of this proposition? Is it universal or particular? Now, the quantity of this proposition is universal. No politician is corrupt. Pagka tinagalog mo, walang politiko ang corrupt. There's another way of writing this example. Pwede mo sabihin, all politicians are not corrupt. That is the other way of writing this proposition. Pareho lang yon, ha? No politician is corrupt and all politicians are not corrupt. So again, what proposition has a negative quality and a universal quantity? Okay, you can go back to the square of opposition and you will find out that it is an E proposition. An E proposition is universal negative. So the first example is an E proposition. What about the second example? Some politicians are corrupt. Easily, you will spot the word some, which means that the proposition is particular. So the quantity is particular. What about the quality? Can you spot the word no or not in the second example? Wala kang makikita. Kaya, easily, sasabihin natin, affirmative ang proposition na ito. Okay? So, anong proposition ang particular affirmative? Is it A, E, I, or O? Pagkababalikan mo ang square propositions, malinaw na ito ay I proposition. Alright? So, anong relationship ng E proposition sa I proposition? Again, refer back to the square propositions, you will find out that these propositions are contradictory propositions. Okay, let's go to another example. Ito, all S are P and no S is P. Contrary propositions daw ito. Tignan natin kung bakit. First, all politicians are corrupt. Second, no politician is corrupt. Let's go back to the first example. All politicians are corrupt is an A proposition. Why is it an A proposition? Because an A proposition has a quantity that is universal and the quality is affirmative. Oh, bakit universal? Kasi nga may all, kitang-kita mo naman. Bakit affirmative? Kasi wala kang makikitang no or not sa proposition. Kaya yung unang halimbawa is an A proposition. Now, what about the next example? No politician is corrupt. Okay, sabi natin kanina, there's another way of writing that. What's the other way of writing it? All politicians are not corrupt. So, easily you can spot the word no, kaya ang quality ng proposition nito ay negative. Ngayon, ano naman ang quantity? Is it universal or particular? Okay, it is universal. Ngayon, anong proposition ang universal negative? A, E, I, or O? The answer is E. So the first example is an A proposition, while the second example is an E proposition. Anong relationship nilang dalawa? Contrary sila. Bakit contrary? Tignan mo ulit. Balikan mo ulit yung square of oppositions. Okay, next example. Some S are P and some S are not P. Subcontraries daw sila. Again, we have two examples below. Some politicians are corrupt and some politicians are not corrupt. The first example has a quantity that is particular and the quality is affirmative. Madali. Bakit particular? Kasi sa modifier na some. Bakit affirmative? Kasi wala ka namang makikitang no or not sa proposition. So, anong proposition ito? A, E, I, or O? The answer is I. Okay? It is an I proposition. The quantity of an I proposition is particular and the quality of an I proposition is affirmative. The next example is an O proposition because an O proposition is particular and negative. Some politicians are not corrupt. It is particular because of the modifier some, and it is negative because easily you can spot the word not. So what is the relationship of the first proposition to the second proposition? They are sub-contraries. Next example, some S are P is a subaltern of all S are P. Ano ibig sabihin nito? Some politicians are corrupt, all politicians are corrupt. Ano ang relationship ng dalawang yan? So bago yon, identify muna natin kung anong klaseng proposition ang meron sa dalawang halimbawa. Some politicians are corrupt is an I proposition, while all politicians are corrupt is an A proposition. So I yung unang halimbawa at A yung pangalawang halimbawa. Now the last, some S are not P is a subaltern of no S is P. Two examples again, some politicians are not corrupt is an O proposition. And the other example is no politician is corrupt is an E proposition. Now, why are we talking about this? This is to show you this pair of oppositions, the relationship of each proposition to another. It is important to know the relationship so that we will know the truth and falsity of propositions. Okay, para malaman natin yung truth and falsity ng isang proposition at ang relasyon niya sa isa pang proposition. And this is how we're going to explain it. Two propositions are contradictory if they cannot both be true and they cannot both be false. Ang dalawang propositions daw ay contradictory kung hindi pwedeng dalawa silang o pareho silang tama at hindi pwedeng pareho silang mali. Nangangahulugan, pagka merong dalawang propositions na contradictory, isa ay tama, ang isa ay mali. Kaya tingnan natin sa unang halimbawa, all politicians are corrupt. Some politicians are not corrupt. If the first example, all politicians are corrupt, is true, then some politicians are not corrupt is false. Because it's not possible that a proposition is true and O proposition is also true. Parang sinabi mong lahat ng tatay ay mapagmahal. O, yan yung halimbawa ng A proposition. No? All politicians are corrupt. Another example, lahat ng tatay ay mapagmahal. Anong relasyon niya sa O proposition? Anong O proposition nun? Ilang tatay ay hindi mapagmahal. Pwede bang parehong totoo yun? O pwede bang parehong mali yun? Hindi pwede. Kasi pagka sinabi mong lahat ng tatay mapagmahal, pagka sinabi mong totoo yun, hindi pwedeng totoo rin na sabihin mong may ilang tatay na hindi mapagmahal. Hindi ba? Ganon din sa halimbawa dito, all politicians are corrupt. Lahat nga eh. Example lang to. Lahat ng politicians ay corrupt. Ngayon, meron kang pangalawang statement. Merong ilang politicians ang hindi corrupt. Ibig sabihin, isa lang doon ang tama. Pagka yung isa tama, yung isa mali. Hindi maaaring pareho tama, hindi maaaring pareho ang mali. Okay? Another example, no politician is corrupt and then some politicians are corrupt. Walang politician ay corrupt. Yan yung unang halimbawa. Anong relasyon niya sa pangalawang halimbawa? May ilang politicians corrupt. Ibig sabihin, sa dalawang propositions na yan, isa lamang ang tama. Hindi maaaring pareho silang tama at pareho silang mali. Ngayon, bakit mahalaga itong malaman? Kasi pagka ikaw nakikipag-debate na, you will be dissecting and analyzing propositions whether they become contradictory. Kasi mahirap na pagka nagbitaw ka ng mga statements mo, tapos babaguhin mo, madaling ma-spot kung contradictory yan o hindi. Okay? Next. Two propositions are contraries if they cannot both be true but can both be false. Ang dalawang propositions ay contrary kung hindi pwede sila parehong tama pero maaaring pareho silang mali. Halimbawa natin dito, all politicians are corrupt. Tapos, yung second proposition, no politician is corrupt. Sa una, lahat ng politicians ay corrupt. Yung pangalawa, walang politician ang corrupt. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Okay, hindi maaaring pareho silang tama, pero maaaring parehong mali ang propositions. Ayan. Okay? You can think of other examples like all fathers are loving. Tapos sa pangalawa, not all fathers are loving. Contrary ka agad yun. How will you spot which proposition is true? Mahirap. But definitely, both cannot be true, but both can be false. Okay? Next example. Two propositions are sub-contraries if they cannot both be false, but can both be true. Ang dalawang propositions ay sub-contraries kung hindi maaaring pareho silang mali, pero maaaring pareho silang tama. Examples provided, number one, some politicians are corrupt, and on the other, some politicians are not corrupt. Okay? Sa halimbawang ito, hindi maaaring pareho silang mali, pero maaaring pareho silang tama. Isip pa ng ibang halimbawa. Ang lahat ng lalaki, ay hindi, this is particular, no? May ilang lalaking mapagmahal. Another example, may ilang lalaking hindi mapagmahal. Sa halimbawang binigay natin, hindi maaaring pareho silang mali, pero maaaring pareho silang tama. Okay, ang tawag doon, sub-contraries. Next, a proposition is a subaltern of another if it must be true if its superaltern is true, and the superaltern must be false if the subaltern is false. Now, I want you to go back to the square of oppositions. A, E, I, O. Okay? Ang A, ang superaltern ng I. Okay? At itong E, ang superaltern niya, ang subaltern niya ay O. Maliwanag? Sa unang halimbawa, some politicians are corrupt. This is an I proposition. All politicians are corrupt. That is an A proposition. Ibig sabihin, pag tama ang superaltern, automatic, tama rin ang kanyang subaltern. Okay, another example. Some politicians are not corrupt, and no politician is corrupt. The first example is an O proposition, and the other example is an E proposition. Kung tama ang E proposition, tama sigurado ang O proposition. Ibig sabihin, kung tama ang superaltern, tama rin ang subaltern. Kung mali ang superaltern, mali rin ang subaltern. Yan ang ibig sabihin at explanation ng square of oppositions. I'm sure there are other examples that you have in mind. Siguro mahirap i-digest yung ganito kabilis na lecture natin. That's why I'm recording this, so you can always go back to this video. And so if you have other questions, feel free to email me or ask me during our synchronous class. Okay? So again, in this video, we were able to talk about the square of oppositions and the relationship of propositions with each other. We also tried to determine the truth and falsity of the propositions in relation to other propositions. Again, if you have questions, feel free to email me. That would be for now. Thank you very much. Watch out for the next video. Goodbye.